Hi, everyone, and welcome to What Comes Next, the interview and the application. This is the first of many Inside Gov's virtual events that we will have over the next few months. My name is Katie White. I'm one of the admissions directors here at Govs. We're so excited to have you with us tonight as you take the next steps in your journey towards joining potentially our community, whether you've already started your application or are preparing for your interview, or just here to learn more about the process. You're in the right place with the right people. Tonight's session is all about clarity and confidence throughout this process. We know the admissions process can bring a lot of questions, and that's why we brought in someone who can answer them with both insight and experience. So it is my pleasure to introduce someone who plays a key role in shaping the student experience right from the start, our Dean of Enrollment, Mr. Mike Keneally. Enjoy tonight, everyone.
Ms. White, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. And at this point, Ms. White will start to record the event so that those who might have wanted to come, or maybe they join the process a little bit later, will go and put up this recording. Also for you, if you hear something and you say, oh, wait, what was it that they offered? There will be an opportunity to go back and see that later. As Ms. White mentioned, my name is Mike Keneally. I'm the Assistant Head of School and Dean of Enrollment here at the Governor's Academy. As we all do, I play lots of different roles on campus in addition to my work in admission. I am an assistant coach for girls varsity soccer. In my background, I have coached the varsity baseball team here as a head coach and taught AP government and politics. As we go through this evening, you're going to have the opportunity to learn, but also to ask questions. I do want to make sure that you know Ms. White, and I also want to introduce Mariama, our student guest for today. So Mariama, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then we'll get going with the content.
Hi, I'm Mariama, and I'm a freshman here at Govs.
Outstanding. And where are you from?
I'm from Byfield, Massachusetts, also 6 minutes away from the campus, so yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. So as we go through, we have a script to follow that we think is going to be helpful as you think about what to expect in an interview and what we might be expecting. But we also appreciate that you might have some really specific questions, or there might be content areas that you'd like to know more about. And so you can use the question and answer, the Q&A box, to go ahead and send those questions in. And Ms. White will organize them and make sure that they get to us. Periodically through this event, we'll be talking about specific elements of our admission cycle. So for those who were there early, and you'll be seeing it again, we will drop in the events page from our website so that you can think about the other events that you might come over the course of the year. We also will have a couple of other bits and pieces of information to share there. But please make sure that you ask your questions so that we can answer them. So the first part of the session tonight is really to talk about the interview. What I should point out is that doesn't mean it's the most important part of the application process. Every part has its role in our making sure that we understand who you are as a person, as a student, and based on your achievements and talents. And different elements of the application will approach that, will give us that information. What's different about the interview is that unless we're really careful, that student who's applying thinks, oh my goodness, I'm going to walk into a room that I've never been in with someone I've never met, and they're going to ask me really hard questions to try to trick me or trap me or figure out how smart I am. How do I prepare for that? All right. So first of all, it's not like that. All right. The interview from our perspective, if you think about logically, this will make sense, is really designed to give us the opportunity to talk with you about the things that you like to talk about most. And then we might ask you some why questions. Oh, you really enjoyed this subject. Let's talk about why. Where does that come from? What's the story behind it? So that might be a harder question because it might be something you've never thought about, but it's really not a hard question. It's still in that general category of things that you like to talk about. As we move through the interview, we will logically start with who you are by what you do. where you go to school, what classes you're involved in, and what you like to do outside of class or summer or family or whatever it might be that's easy for you to talk about. At some point, quite often, regardless of the school to which you apply, the questions might turn to who you are by what you value. Now, that doesn't mean that the questions are any more complicated or hard because we're still talking about things that are really central and important, things that you know and understand, but they are somewhat different in nature and they encourage a different sort of conversation. So, what we'll do tonight is I'll be working with Mariama primarily on okay, so if we're in this part of the interview, what are some of my favorite questions to ask? And Mariama will, on the cuff, be able to respond to them and give you a little bit of a sense of what she's doing. And then I'll give some feedback with what I hear in those answers and what might happen next in the interview based on what she has said. The goal here is not to tell you that the questions that I like to ask will be the only ones that you hear in an interview. That's not the case. Miss White and I run our interviews differently, and we have different questions, even though we talk generally about what it is that we prioritize at Govs as those central topics we would like to talk about and learn more about. I'm just giving you my questions. Maybe so if you come to Govs and you have me, you have a little bit of a head start, but probably more importantly, so that you can think about your answers. Probably more importantly, while Mariama is awesome and her questions will be tremendous, that doesn't mean that she's giving you the right answer. The right answer is the one that's authentic to you. What we're trying to do is make sure that you can think in advance, not about just being yourself or not about what the right answer is. But if the purpose is for you to tell your story and we're asking questions that elicit your story, we're trying to give you a look behind the curtain at what those questions might be about so that you can be prepared in advance. All right. So you ready, Mario? We're ready. So I will mention that early on, you will likely, in most schools, not all, but you'll have gone on tour first. You arrive and someone greets you, and then either a student or your interviewer will take you for a walk around campus. Sometimes it's reversed, sometimes it's a group tour, but in general, it'll be a student who brings you on a tour around campus. And then you arrive back at the admission office. Someone like me or Miss White walks out to introduce and basically let you know that we're your interviewer. That's when we walk into that office you've never been in before, but it's okay, right? Because again, remember, we're there to encourage you to talk about the things you like to talk about. Oftentimes when you're walking in or when we first sit down, we understand that you might be a little bit nervous or anxious, so we might just start with how was the tour? Did you enjoy it? Did you see things that you anticipated, or was it a little bit different? None of those have right or wrong answers. We are just trying to get you to start talking so you can hear your own voice and have the confidence that we're going to be okay here. I'm not going to ask you, Mariama, to answer this question. We'll wait until number 2, but I just want to let you know, generally speaking, when I start after I've had that conversation, is it your first interview or not? And please know that I'm trying to hear you at your very best. I'll often say, okay, so I know nothing about you, Mariama. Again, not for this one, but give me the educational autobiography of Mariama. Now that sounds like a hard question. It's actually not, and I do define it in my interviews. I said, really what I'm just looking for is kind of where you've been to school along the way, just to find out whether you've been in one school or you've moved quite a bit, rather than me asking you grade by grade. And again, it just gives you the chance in my office to talk about things that you know well. Oh yeah, I went to kindergarten here in first grade, and I went to elementary and then middle school. And it, again, gets you started, but it does give me some information. And then what I usually do is I turn to the fact that Mariama is applying from a school to a school, so we might as well talk about school first. And the way I frame the question, and I do this specifically a little bit later in the fall, but I'll even do it in September. So Mariama, if I am reading your application at the end of this process, I will get to see your transcript. So I don't need to ask what your favorite classes are by your best grade because I get to see that. So I get to ask what I think is a much better question. In your core academics, English, math, that group of classes, regardless of what grade you've earned, where do you feel you're doing your best work? Where are you most engaged?
The class I feel I'm doing my best work in is English. Right now, we're reading and analyzing the book The Odyssey, which I find very interesting because of the Greek mythology woven into the stories. And I find myself very interested, and I find myself participating in class and raising my hand regularly, and also even talking to my teacher one-on-one to get extra help after class.
Excellent. Outstanding. So let's sort of pull that apart. And Miss White, if at any point you hear something that I haven't commented on that you want to, please jump in. So what I hear from that is I had the answer. It's English class or LA or whatever it is called in your school. But what's crucial here, Mariam, and what you did for me is you didn't stop there, right? Because if you would stop there, if you had just said, well, I really like English, my next question would have been, okay, why? What is it about English class that you enjoy most? And what you did for me, and what I'm encouraging those in the webinar to think about, is if you can get accustomed to answering a question that's asked, that's factually based. What is your favorite class, right? Worded in a number of different ways. And you can think about it as I'm going to answer the question and then I'm going to add in because and let your answer go from there. That's what Mariama did. I like English because. And she walked into and gave me, which I would certainly use in subsequent follow-up questions, the title of the book. Oh, so what part of the Odyssey are you in? Oh, you like discussion. You like that that's happening in class. Tell me, is it more a discussion around the factual events of the book, or do you tend to have more debates? Are there opportunities where students will offer different opinions? Again, for those who were here at the webinar, there isn't a right or a wrong answer to those follow-up questions I'm asking. What I'm trying to figure out, all right, Mariama, you like English, right? Someone else might like math or science or whatever it is. What I'm trying to figure out is what is it about that course of study that you particularly like? In some cases, it's the content. So I've always loved to read, or I've always loved math. It comes easily. I read math, right? It could be science because you love the labs. Doesn't matter what the subject is. What I'm looking for is why you were most engaged. And if you can do that in one answer and give me some depth, well, now the follow-up questions are not, why do you like English? It's, tell me about the book you're reading. Tell me about whether you've always loved English or what type of discussion question you like. Okay, good. As we work through this, I'll oftentimes move from the courses to an understanding of the element of teaching and learning that you enjoy most. I'm interested in knowing what sort of teacher you particularly enjoy. And so what I'll usually do, and everyone has a different way of asking this question. This is mine. So, Mariama, I have just heard that you love English. And I say, well, Mariama, you know, I appreciate that. I happen to teach history, and it's actually not a coincidence that you were in this interview with me because you were studying civics in your class, and I've written this great book. And my great book looks at the difference between those who wrote the Constitution and those who wrote the Declaration of Independence in the context of all men created equal and rule of law being in conflict. And because of my awesome relationship with your teacher, who I don't know, and by the way, I've never written a book, but because of those things, I am going to arrive at your school next week as your history teacher. Isn't that awesome? So here's the thing, Mariama. Only part of this question that has truth in it. I am really competitive. And if I am walking out of your classroom on Friday of that week, I want you to look at me. No, I want you to point at me and say, that's the best teacher I have ever had. He is better than English. In order to accomplish that, I'm not worried about the content. I wrote the book. It's awesome. If I'm going to accomplish that, it's because I run the classroom perfectly every day. So Mariama, I'm going to let you tell me how to teach. You have me for a week in a history classroom. I want to walk out of there the best teacher you've ever had. Tell me what you want.
if I had you as my history teacher or just a teacher in general, I would want you to be someone like my current teacher, Mr. Horner. I feel he has a great way with words and he switches up his tone and uses eye contact to make sure I'm engaged in his lessons. And his open discussions really focus on things like not only in school but outside that I can apply to my real life experiences. And I really feel like he's just a funny guy in general. He really lightens up the classroom and makes learning fun.
Awesome. Excellent. So as you listen to the answer on the webinar, and as I listen to it, I've got the name of the teacher, and I understand that if I'm going to be the best teacher ever, I now have a target, right? I got to be better than this Mr. Horner guy, right? So what I'll probably do, Mariam, is I'll follow up on that. I say, okay, so I really appreciate that answer, and I appreciate how he makes you feel in the classroom. A little bit of a follow-up here. At some point, I love the content of my book. I wrote it. It's awesome. It's a great book. And I want to teach the content. So while I understand what I'm going to do in my relationship with you in the classroom, tell me a little bit about how you want me to convey the material. Is this going to be more at the board? Am I talking more? Or are you talking more? What is it that you want me to do?
I would definitely want you to more talk to me in general and not really just like writing things down and making sure that we're just writing it and memorizing it. I like someone who will really talk to me and enforce the things into my brain and just
Right.
make sure that I'm really getting the concept.
Awesome. In the context of that, Mariam, am I asking questions that help me know that you have the information down pat, or am I asking questions where there might be a lot of different answers that are represented in the classroom? What works better for you?
I feel an open-ended question that has a lot of answers and just really just making sure that I feel that my answer is right and not just um sorry.
No, it's perfect. So what Mariama is doing now is I dig in. I think I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that sometimes the questions that are general, what class do you like? You know what class you like. As I get into those questions about why, they do get a little bit harder, right? And what Mariama just did is perfect. She gave an answer to the question. She's giving me more depth. I now could follow up on that open-ended question concept. So, Mariama, you don't have to answer this one. What I often do at the end of I'm coming to be your teacher, make me the best teacher ever question is I'll ask if we were doing a discussion or debate, would I hear your voice early or in the middle, or do you like to wait until the end taking notes? Again, there isn't a right or wrong. It's just giving me information about what Mariama likes to do in the classroom. I'll oftentimes at the end say, if at the end of the week I gave you a test, but I let you choose what type of test it was, like way over here is multiple choice and way over here is you turn the material into a song you're going to sing, right? And in between, there's everything that you can choose from with essays and debate. How would you want to earn your 100? Ask that often, again, not because there's right or wrong, but it gives me that opportunity to think a little bit about what it is that that particular student likes to do. As we wait for Mariama to come back, I'll sort of fill in the gaps a little bit of what happens next in the interview. So oftentimes I'm moving into other categories that are of interest to the student, but they don't necessarily happen in the core area of school. So a lot of times I think of curricular part of life being required and graded, English, math. I think of co-curricular as either required and not graded, like at our school, that might be an athletic team, or not required but graded, like involvement in one of our choral or instrumental ensembles. And then extracurricular is things that are not required nor graded. So these are clubs. And we just today had a club fair. There are basically 40 clubs at here at Clubs, and all of the leaders of those clubs set up a fair just like you might go to for secondary school or parents to college. And it's that opportunity to talk to people who run the clubs and then join them. So what I do oftentimes, Mariama, and I'll ask you to jump in and answer this one, is I'll say, okay, let's leave school, Mariama. Let's go ahead and leave school. So I'm actually going to give you a menu option because what I really want to do is talk about the things that you like to talk about next. So what's next is going to be athletics or visual arts or performing arts or community service or summer or family or pets or whatever it is that you most want to talk about. So you choose. What should we talk about next?
I would love to talk about athletics.
Standing. What do you like to play?
I play soccer. Soccer has a very special place in my heart. I've been playing for since forever.
Outstanding. What do you particularly enjoy about your soccer this year?
Yeah, soccer, I play soccer here at Govs, and I find the team very, very supportive. And
Nice.
even though I can't play, they are very sweet on and off the field, and I feel included, and they are very strong players just in general. And I feel that everyone is super nice and just really wants to be there, and it really shows.
That's awesome. What position do you play?
I play center mid. Center mid is like we do a lot of like switching the field and
Yep.
playing like in a triangle. So yeah.
Excellent. So, Mariama, you've played soccer for so many years, and you have seen thousands of girls who play soccer in clinics and practices and games and tournaments and all the rest. Tell me, what do you feel like you do better than most? What are you kind of proud of that you can do as a soccer player?
Yeah. The thing I feel I do better than most is I feel I have a very strong ability to play under pressure. I feel that I more rise to the occasion instead of shying away, whether that is like taking free kicks or corner kicks or penalty kicks in high game intensity scenarios. I feel that I am like I'm very grateful so I can really help my team and yeah.
Right. Excellent. All right. So as we think about what Mariama just offered in soccer, she lit up when she wanted to talk about soccer. So I know as the interviewer, I'm going to spend some time there. Again, my job is to encourage Mariama to talk about the things that she likes to talk about most. Probably focus on areas where there's some achievement, some pride in what she's doing. And then I have a series of questions that I might follow up with that then allows me more depth. I am not, even though I am the girls' varsity soccer coach, assistant coach, I am not in this moment trying to evaluate her ability. That's not actually my role here. My role is to get her to talk about, and it may be that she plays field hockey, in which case Miss White would be really much more interested as a varsity head coach in field hockey. But in this moment, I'm really just trying to encourage her to talk about what it is that she's good at, that she's proud of. As you might imagine, if you were thinking that you were in the office with me and I was asking that question, a couple of things. One is that it doesn't have to be a talent in the team. Sometimes it is. I'm a particularly good passer. I score the goals. I am a goalie and I stop them. But it may also be your connection with other players and what you take out of athletics, in this case, in that way. If you project this into other areas, let's go into the performing arts. Um, it's a similar phrasing of question. I did skip over and I might ask, okay, so what teams have you played for, or what community theater or troops or ensembles have you been a part of? My follow-up questions might be very similar. What do you feel that you do better than peers? But I oftentimes will ask if I had a singer with me. I'll say, oh, okay. So you knew, Mariama, don't worry, you don't have to answer this one. Mariama, that, Governors is basically a pre-professional performing arts school, which we're not. We have a fantastic group of ensembles in the performing arts, but that doesn't define us. But if I ask the question, I'm playing a little bit. And I say, Mariama, you knew 3 weeks ago that part of your interview would be to perform a piece that you would have been working on for the last 3 weeks that you would perform in front of a group of instructors here. Tell me what you would have been playing and why, right? So you don't have to answer. But that when I'm working with a performing artist, it gives me an opportunity, a window into the type of music that they enjoy. And the follow-up questions oftentimes have to do with what is it that would have been particularly hard to do, or what was it about that piece that made you choose it? If I have a visual artist, quite often I'll ask them, you see the two pieces behind me, that one's more of a drawing. Um, I would say to Mariam, I would say, okay, so you knew coming in here. No, I actually would word it this way. I'd say, what I want you to do, Mariama, first is I want you to conjure in your mind a drawing or a painting that you've done that is really good. You know it is. It's like on your wall or you've given it as a gift. And then do you have it? And the student will say yes. And I say, all right, so you brought it with you. It's right here, right? And you wanted me to see this work because it's important to you. And the problem, Mariam, is you can see it and I can't. So I want you to describe it with as much detail as you possibly can so I can see it with you. And so then the artist will then talk about, and this can also be in robotics, it can be in lots of different areas of creation, what it is that captures your mind in that particular area. And I ask you to describe it because I want to see your excitement. And I want to follow up on what makes you proud about that particular creation. Okay. I will say in the crowd here, I was looking at the names a little bit before. We have a number of students who are applying for the ninth grade, a few were for 10th or 11th. I will say that if I have an 11th grade applicant to governors and they answer in the way Mariama did around athletics, I will ask them, okay, so now let's have you be a captain at Governors a year from now. And what's happening on the field with Miss White in field hockey, yep, she controls her practice and the tone and the pace and the tenor of that on the field is controlled by the coach. But the other parts of the team, that's culture that's important to you, that you're going to have a significant role in creating. So tell me what it would be like to play for a team that you were captaining. Again, I would not ask that of an eighth grade applicant or ninth grade applicant, an eighth grader very often. It's not that they haven't been captains, but it's a little bit different than someone who is seeing high school athletics and for whom that's important as we go through. Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning that, oh, by the way, a reminder, if you do have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A box and make sure that you pass them along. And Miss White will jump in if she sees some and frame them for either Mariam or for me if we can be of help. I mentioned at the beginning that at some point in the interview, we do move from who you are by what you do to who you are by what you value. And there are lots of different ways that interviewers will approach that based on their particular style. I did, in talking to Mariama before, I let her know one of the ones that I use most commonly. And in order to ask that question, I need to ask her, a first name of a best friend. In a really funny moment, and true to Mariama and who she is here at Governors, that was like the hardest thing I asked her in preparation for this entire webinar because wait, there are so many and I don't want her name. So she gave me a bunch of names and I am picking Sabrina. Okay, Mariama, I'm going to use her. So somewhere early in the interview, I would have pulled out that name. I would have said, for this question, I need sort of a best friend, and she would give me that, and I would lodge it away. And later in the interview, I come back with this two-sided question. I said, earlier in the interview, Mariama, we talked about Sabrina, and what's really awesome is for Sabrina, she got to come to your interview. How great is that? It's like she got to come and sit with us for a while because she's so special to you. So tell me what makes her special. What are the adjectives that go along with Sabrina?
I would definitely say that Sabrina and I have a super similar personality. That's the reason we clicked so instantly. We met here at Govs. But I would say Sabrina is very empathetic. She one day I was late to lunch and she had already eaten, but she still went and sat with me at lunch, and that just really describes the person she is. And also, I would definitely say she is super funny. She never fails to make me laugh, and she
Right.
always brightens my day when she cracks a joke.
Awesome. Awesome. Nice to be known that way as a friend, don't you think? So what I've been given by Mariama is really helpful. but I'm actually setting her up for the next question. I will comment that in that answer, what caught my ear was she's like me, right? So this is a moment where I can decide in a number of different ways to get to what I really want to, which is this. Most interviewers really want to ask an interviewee, what do you like about yourself? But that's that I'm old and I don't want to be asked that, especially in an interview situation, because I'm going to be trying to decide what Miss White is trying to hear or what she wants to hear, and I'm going to get all confused about it. So what I'm trying to do in the interview is I'm trying to make it easier for Mariama to answer that question. So the first part of my question is useful. I get to hear what she values by what she respects and admires in another person. Humor and generosity is what I took out of that answer as primary attributes. But here's what I follow up with. So, Mariama, you know this. You studied governors as you were coming in, and you know that this year we added that peer recommendation form to. No, we didn't. We didn't do any such thing. But if we did, Mariama, you and I both know right now that it would be Sabrina who would be writing yours, that peer recommendation for. So I have it right here. I have Sabrina's peer recommendation submission for Mariama's application to the Governor's Academy. What do you think it says?
On my recommendation, I know Sabrina would for sure say that I'm pretty patient. She's usually late to class, but I still wait for her just so that we can enter together. And just like she never left me at the lunch table, I would never leave her. I also think that she would say I'm inclusive. I strive to make people feel seen in a room. And even like, let's say they had no one to sit with, I would let them sit with me. And through that, we've made a lot of new friends that I don't think I would have made otherwise.
Awesome. Great answer. Right. And as you listen to that, whether it's a student or a parent, there's a window into Mariama in that answer. It is okay in interviews to use adjectives that are positive about yourself or about your achievements or your abilities. It's kind of okay to brag, right? I know and I appreciate that sometimes that doesn't feel particularly comfortable, right? There's that, but I like to be humble and I don't want to go over the top. And that's a fine instinct. Just understand that when we're asking you about something that you like about yourself, in whatever way we approach that question, it's okay, probably good to use positive adjectives, just as it would be to talk positively about your achievements and your abilities in other areas. I will say, as you get closer to the end of the interview, all of us will say, okay, so I've asked you 72 questions, Mariama. You've done a great job with this. What can I help you with? What questions do you have about governors? I think for some students, there's that moment if you've thought about questions at a time, but there's a little bit of anxiety in the interview. Sometimes you can get to that point and it feels like almost like an abrupt end to one part and the brain shuts off, right? And it's hard to remember the question that you wanted to ask. It is absolutely okay to write down your questions in advance. And then you take them out of your pocket at that point and you just go through them. And yes, you should look at the questions and think about what you've talked about. If you spent 10 minutes talking to me about soccer, because that's what we decided to talk about, and you wrote down a question about soccer, you probably don't have to ask it. Right. And there should be that little guardrail for you saying, okay, we actually handled that one, and you go through. I do think it's wonderful to ask questions that are school specific. You saw something on a website or you heard it from a friend and you just wanted to get my perception on it. Or you've asked the tour guide and you've asked someone else and someone else, and now you're asking me a question that is of particular interest and value to you. And you just want to get the answer from a number of people in the Govs family. It is also good to ask questions across schools, things that are really important to you and you may want to ask. I think one of the ones that is a good question and fairly common, so I'm not telling you to ask this question, but I am saying I'm trying to make sure that if you're not quite sure what I mean by asking questions across schools, one that I hear fairly often is who does well at Govs? Or what are you looking for in the admission process when you're reading candidates for Govs? right? And we're prepared to answer it. Today, tonight, this is designed to be helpful wherever you might be interviewing. So unless you ask the question in the box, we're not going to go and sell Govs on this one. But it is a question where you can get some differences from place to place. Hopefully, they all want to see the best out of the students. They do. But you'll hear different words and different points of emphasis. For the parents here, this is not primarily about you, but I will mention that in general, there will be a parent conversation. It is not an interview. They usually take one of two shapes. Either the interviewer will sit down and go through what they learned about Mariama, your child. And basically, at some level, not this directly, but they'll say, did I get it right? Right, and give you the opportunity to add your perspective on we have taken away from the time with your child. And then we ask you to ask us questions so that we can help you best understand Govs. The other model, I will admit this is the one that I use, is I don't go through what I've just talked about with Mariama. It's not secret. Nothing's in a cone of silence. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I don't start there because I don't want the parent trapped by the information that I've gleaned from the student interview. What I do instead is I ask parents to understand that our part of this process is really focused on the last few years of Mariama's life, and that they, as parents or guardians, own the stories of a lifetime. They know how Mariama became the young woman that she is, and the stories that are Mariama being Mariama, doing Mariama things. And so what I ask for is the great gift of sharing some of your favorites. All right, and that's my first part of the interview and or conversation. The back part is making sure we answer questions. At the very end, we'll give you business cards. I will always encourage, we do, Mariama, if there are exciting things that happen later, or if you want to send me a picture of that drawing that you did, or tell me about the game that's coming up, or your first opportunity to get back on the soccer field, that would be great. Love to stay in touch. But I'm also available for questions. Good. Ms. White, do we have any questions that have come in about the interview, or should we move on to the application?
Mike, we did have one come through regarding the requirements around participating in athletics and or in art each year. So I did answer privately, but if you wanted to expand that, you can.
I'm sure it's there, and I will just add for any others who have the same question. Governors has an afternoon program requirement. We define a team here as a group of students working with an adult toward a common goal. So Mariama would complete her fall expectations playing soccer. That's great. But by that definition, the cast of a play is also a team by that definition. So is the theater tech group, so is the group that does community service, or the group that organizes our statewide Special Olympics soccer tournament. There are lots of different ways that a student might complete their afternoon program requirement by season. So I think what we'll do is we'll transition into the application. So you have gone from all the schools and you've visited open houses and you've done all sorts of things here at Govs and at other schools. And now you've decided where you're going to apply. Most of the schools, and certainly here at Govs, will accept a couple of means by which that you can submit your application. I'm going to focus on the two most common here. It is not to say that this is an exclusionary list, but generally speaking, students will use the common application system, either called Standard Application Online, SAO, that is brought to you by the same people who bring you the SSAT test. The Enrollment Management Association. But you can simply go, if you've never seen this, you can go into your browser and do a search on Standard Application Online, private school. It'll bring you right to the website. And you can open up a portal there. The other is Gateway to private schools, or Apply with Us is what you'll see on their emails when they write back to you. And that's also a system and a means by which students can send their applications in a really pretty efficient way. And what's different within the last 10 years with these two systems is that once you set up the portal and we are partnered with them, you can send via email requests for your teacher recommendations, for your transcripts. It gives you the question students are going to answer. All the demographic information is submitted once, and then you just decide how many schools you're sending it to, instead of what parents may have known from their time of doing that for each individual school with the application on their website or on paper, depending on your age. Mariama, you did SAO as your application, and they generally will ask for, they'll maybe 4 short answer questions, 3 or 4, and then one where they ask for a longer answer, an essay. I give this to you as the choice. As you thought about this in preparation for tonight, if we were picking one of those questions, which one would you like to talk about?
I'm pretty sure there was a question about like one achievement about to share that I was pretty proud of and that shaped me as a person.
Excellent. And last year, I'm going to have Mariama talk a little bit about what she did and how she approached it. I will say in last year's essay, first of all, the SAO questions change every year. I get to be on a group that wrote them for a while, but none of those will show up this year, so you can't blame me. But they change every year and they pick from a range. The one that Mariama is going to talk about actually was two-sided. It said to talk about an achievement or a challenge that you have learned from and explain what it was and why. So Mariama, as you think about it, maybe you can share with the people on the webinar what you did with that question, sort of the content of your response, and then to the degree you're comfortable, why you chose to write about what you did and what process you went through to before you knew it was done.
Yeah. So I chose to talk about my accomplishment of being nominated by my teachers and peers for it's called Project 351. And I was very excited about this accomplishment and I really wanted to share that. I felt super honored and I wanted to include that in my application to show how I really valued others and how they really thought that I was worthy and deserving of this accomplishment.
Excellent. And I did, when I read it, it obviously has that distinction element to it. It is an achievement. You were chosen and it was by your faculty. And so fantastic. The other part of your response that caught my eye is what Project 351 did, right? You were talking about it in the future at the time that you wrote it. But I think that's instructive too, in terms of, in a minute, I'm going to talk about how we read those submissions. So do you remember at all what you wrote about Project 351 in its own, as its own entity, not just a selection, but what you would do with them?
Yeah, Project 351 is so basically one person is selected from 351 towns of Massachusetts and they come together to do community service all around to help those in need and it's very, very rewarding and I feel very honored that I was a part of it.
Awesome. And so the reason I asked that as a follow-up, just for the group here, as you think about the questions that we ask in an interview, and you think about the questions that a student is asked to write about, they accomplish specific things for us, right? They talk not only about achievements, that who you are by what you do, but they also talk about the attributes, the characteristics of the students who come in that inform, certainly for a school like Governors, what it is that we're trying to accomplish here, or who it is that does their best work at Governors. And so the reason I pushed you a little bit on that, Mariama, was the achievement side is self-evident. The other side of this that's important, as you heard Mariama answer the question about how Sabrina would write about Mariama, there's a consistency there with what we hear about what she values in Project 351. There's a generosity aspect that is tied in with the achievement aspect. It's wonderful to play soccer at a high level, but it's how the players treat each other that she talked about there. And what that does, we don't have to have resonance or this single line that ties together all these elements of the application. But what I do want the group on the webinar to hear is if that's authentic, if that's real, if that's who Mariama is, and we were to, in addition, hear some of those same adjectives from her teacher recommendations, which happened, then we have a really clear sense of, okay, this is the character of the person. We will look at the transcript, or test scores, or the quality of mind that comes from the teacher recommend. Of course, that matters. We're a school that's earned the right to be selected, but it's really important in this community that we're also seeing those other adjectives that are really important to us. And so that was there in the 351 response that Mariama gave at the time. Mariama, before we leave this, because I'm going to talk about Gateway for a minute, when you were writing it, and this is not just the 351, this can be any of the questions that you wrote for your SAO, did you do it all in one hit and hit submit? Did you do it and then come back to it and edit it, but no one else could see it? Did you go and at some point ask for advice from a teacher or an adult or someone you trusted to go? What was your process between sitting down and writing it and hitting that submit button?
I felt it was easier to do my essays over time, and I would write. I wrote about things that I thought I should share in my essays, and I really thought about that, and I talked with my family and really found like a topic that I felt strong in and that I really wanted to share with the admissions. And what I did with that is I started to write, and I just shared things that I really felt confident in. And then I edited it for a while until I felt really confident in my answers.
Excellent. Love it. And I think that's wonderful advice. I wasn't quite sure what your answer would be on that, but I think it's fantastic advice. So if I'm translating that back out as the admission person, I think it's really important for the voice and the story to be the students, right? And so the initial write should really be coming from what that student believes best represents them. That doesn't mean that you can't ever ask for help. I think in the world of AI that we share, there's a place for AI in the educational space. In the application space, it is far better for us, certainly, but also for the student who is applying to selective schools to know that what they have put in writing and what they've submitted reflects them at a core, as well as their writing ability. All of that offered. For you to have some trusted adults to go back to with, I'm planning on writing about this. What do you think? Can you look at this sentence or this paragraph and tell me what you think? Perfectly fine, right? It's not a matter of writing, and parents, please resist the temptation of saying, well, if I were writing it, because you're not applying. Your child is applying. And so you ought to allow that process to be theirs. But I think there is a place for the students here, once you've established it and you're doing the editing process, for you to pick a couple people who you really trust and allow them to give you some feedback. What you ultimately do or edit ought to be yours. All right, that ought to significantly represent who you are in this application process. So one thing that I'll add here, and I'll just do it very briefly, is I mentioned Gateway as an alternative, and there is a difference between SAO and Gateway. So SAO, where Mariama went in, they have one set of questions that all of their applicants in that year will be answering, and we accept it. And there is absolutely no difference between a Gateway and an SAO applicant in our, there's no advantage or disadvantage. The difference with Gateway, because it was created by schools like ours, is that each individual school does have its own application. And Katie, if you want to put up ours at any point or drop it in the chat box, that would be fine so people see it. And those questions, like the ones that come out of the interview, are largely based on the things that we most want to hear about. And so Gateway allows the student to submit their demographics and to go through the teacher recommendation and transcript requests really seamlessly, just like SAO. The difference is that when the student gets to the application part, they will see governor's questions and not SAO questions. So that if you are applying to 4, 5, 6, 7 schools, and you use Gateway, well, the student will be writing 4, 5, 6, 7 different essays. And some of them are going to be similar from school to school, but not all of them. So don't worry about saving this. If you can see this at any time. But these are the questions on our application. And you can see that they're predicated on values that we have. And the top group of 5 are short answers. And the essays down below, a student will pick one of 3 of those essays to write about. And what it does is it allows you, the student, to use SAO and know that you're applying in a way that we accept. But if you go and look, it maybe gives you a window in on what we value as a school. If you elect to write in Gateway, great, fantastic. And we'll read those application questions as well. So I think with that, Miss White, we're about 10 minutes to 8 o'clock. And I do want to, you have given us the time on a weekday in the fall. I do want to make sure that if there are any questions, you take the time and go ahead and throw those in. But short of that, first of all, I want to thank Miss White because, and she'll hate me for doing this, but she does so much work on our events and make sure that they run smoothly and people can access them whether online or in person. And one of our largest events that will monopolize quite a bit of Miss White's time is our open house on October 25th. It's on a Saturday. You can find it on our events page, which I think has been in the chat, and maybe you can throw that link in one more time, Miss White. I will say that our open house is a little bit different than most. It doesn't make it better. I don't ever want to represent it that way. But as we talk about Govs and we talk about the family that we are and the way in which a student arrives here and does their best work is if they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. We do a fantastic job with optimists. And so that informs our open house. We will certainly welcome you. You will be subjected to me thanking you for coming, and our head of school will say some welcoming words. But at that point where most open houses go to tours and panels, we don't do that. We give you a map, and we have everyone here, faculty and students. And what we want you to do is to create your own adventure. And for some families, they have one conversation that they want to have, and they go and find that person. For others, they're with us for 4 hours and they walk the campus and they meet all sorts of people. And so we encourage you to consider the open house because you get past the admissions people, right? You get to our faculty and to our students to learn more about the school. With that, Mariama, thank you. You've given up a weeknight to come and join us, and in particular, to help a whole group of students who don't know you and you don't know them as they enter into this journey. Thank you for your perspective. And mostly for those who have joined us on the webinar, thank you for joining us. We know it's a complicated time in the school year, having just started and in life. And for you to give us an hour of your time to learn a little bit more about the interview and the application process is simply a gift. So with that, I think we'll say goodnight. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.